Sunday afternoon, and the cloud will bring some bits and pieces of rain at times, more especially over the high ground and more western parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, the skies will brighten for many parts of England and Wales, and whilst it won't be as sunny or as hot in the very far south as yesterday, it will still be very warm, temperatures still above average, highs of 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. Not quite as warm further north, and as I say, this evening will be fairly damp for northern parts of Scotland. Some bits and pieces of mostly light rain and drizzle off and on, particularly over the higher ground where there will be some low cloud giving quite misty, murky conditions in places. Perhaps turning more generally wet across parts of Northern Ireland with more general spells of rain and drizzle arriving here. But many parts of England and Wales will end the weekend on a dry note once again, and there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and the southwest. Overall, though, through tonight, there will be quite a lot of cloud around across the UK, and even in the south, we could see one or two spots of rain and drizzle from the thickest cloud, but I don't think it will amount to very much at all. And generally speaking, by the end of the night, it will be these western areas, high ground of Wales, southwest England, where we'll see the greatest chance of some rain and drizzle. Quite a warm night to come there in the south, in particular 16 or 17 degrees in the towns and cities, and actually fairly mild further north too. So Monday dawns on a relatively cloudy note for many. Perhaps some bits and pieces of rain, mainly in the west and the north, and certainly turning wetter through the afternoon across the northwest. So Northern Ireland and Western Scotland seeing some pretty wet conditions as we go into the afternoon. But a more humid day for many. Temperatures into the high teens and low 20s in the north, perhaps 26 to 28 degrees in the south.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win over £65,000 in prizes.
You could be our latest Great British Giveaway winner.
First of all, we want to give you
£60,000 in tax-free cash. Plus, you'll also receive a fine gold bar worth over £5,000.
For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
At the stroke of midnight, the news doesn't stop, and neither do we.
Day in, day out. Forget stuffy late night TV shows. We're giving you a front row ticket to the centre of the political universe.
Because breaking news doesn't wait for the morning.
And neither do we. Join us for one of the most controversial and volatile times of politics in human history.
A very big story.
Big story over here.
You won't get this anywhere else. The Late Show live at midnight, every night.
Only on GB News.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. As another spell of extreme heat has gripped Britain, it's worth remembering that even Virginia Woolf in her diary was lost for words. Hot, 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 I repeat. And I doubt that I'm a poet, she sewed. You're most welcome to 2 hours of culture, current affairs and politics. Following Nigel Farage's convincing victory in the Clacton by-election, where do the parties of the right stand now? My panel will discuss. A new report slams Britain's foreign policy up towards Iran, emphasising that Iranian threats are not a distant problem. Can we regain the influence that we once had, or will Britain remain permanently weak on the international stage? The government claims to be modernising the tax system with what's called making tax digital, but users complain that it's absolutely agonising to use. 50 police chiefs have called on the Prime Minister to prevent the early release of PC Harper's killers. How strange is the relationship now between the justice system, our politicians and the police? All of that and much more, but first your latest news headlines with Sophia Winsler.
Michael, thank you and good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. These are your headlines. Reform UK has unveiled plans to save £50 billion a year by abolishing disability benefits for millions of people. Reform's Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick is set to publish the details tomorrow as part of a 50-page paper called Making Welfare Work. Mr Jenrick compared the current system to suicidal empathy and said it's time for the biggest welfare shake-up for a generation. It comes as Nigel Farage looks to end hosepipe bans for good, with a plan to build more reservoirs and slash water-saving targets. Meanwhile, it's understood Ofwat is considering allowing water companies to charge consumers higher prices during droughts. Under the proposed plans, firms will be allowed to impose surge pricing and factor water scarcity into bills as part of a drive to reduce consumption. At least 5 people have been killed and more than 10 injured in Ukraine in the latest wave of Russian strikes, according to officials. Meanwhile, Moscow's mayor said about 600 Ukrainian drones were launched towards the city overnight in an attack that has left at least 1 person dead there. It comes as British drones are being used by Ukraine to strike targets on the Russian mainland for the first time since the war began in 2022. Weapons made by 2 UK companies have been supplied to Ukraine, whose forces use them as part of a deep strike campaign to hit industrial and military targets. A fundraiser in memory of former University of Cambridge professor Jason Arday has raised more than £40,000. Prime Minister Andy Burnham described the professor's death as a tragedy on so many levels and a really, really sad, sorry state of affairs. Arday, who resigned from the university following allegations of plagiarism, was pronounced dead after emergency services were called to an address in South London on Friday. Police say the 41-year-old's death is being treated as unexpected but is not believed to be suspicious. Yesterday, a Windrush campaigner launched a GoFundMe page in Dr. Arday's memory, which has received more than 1,000 donations. And some breaking news, a number of people have died and others have been seriously injured after a head-on collision between 2 cars on a motorway in County Kildare, according to Irish police. 2 cars collided on the M9 between junction 3 and 4 at around 3 a.m. this morning. One of them was travelling southbound on the northbound carriageway of the motorway. The BBC is reportedly attempting to subpoena members of Donald Trump's family to defend itself from the £7.5 billion defamation lawsuit issued by the US president. The case was filed by Mr. Trump over an edit of a speech he made on the 6th of January 2021, which was aired on the BBC documentary. It's understood Mr. Trump's legal team have said the BBC intentionally defamed President Donald Trump, and now the BBC is seeking to harass him. The BBC denies defaming Mr. Trump. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll have more for you in an hour.
Thank you, Sophia Windsor. Nigel Farage increased his vote in Clacton, even though the turnout was well down. But he may face another by-election if the Parliamentary Commissioner finds that donations made to him have breached the rules. There's been no reunification with Rupert Lowe's Restore Party, so the vote on the right splits three ways. Does that mean that the left is likely to win the next election? Joining me now to discuss that is my panel, the former Conservative advisor Lauren McEvatt and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Nice to see you both. Lauren, what do you think after the Clacton by-election has much changed, or at least what do you think the trends are at the moment in terms of support for the parties on the right?
So the most interesting thing about the Clacton by-election, I think, is how badly Reform did in Manchester. So this massive distraction on the South Coast meant that Reform did not take the opportunity to capitalise what were some really good results in the locals in the Manchester area, and did really quite badly in that mayoral election. Now, admittedly, Labour were riding on a larger high because Andy Burnham was proving to be popular as a choice in number 10, but Reform, based on what they'd polled in the locals not 2 months before, stood to do quite well and didn't. And that's because they had to focus all their troops, all their resources at Nigel Farage's little sort of vanity project in Clacton, which was unnecessary and costly to the taxpayer, which is not something the Reform were supposed to be about. People in this country, and I say this as someone who worked in during the expenses scandal, people in this country despise the enrichment of politicians. They actively loathe the idea that people go into politics in this country to get rich. So the idea that Nigel Farage has 5 million sitting in a bank, which may have been for security but may not have been for security because he's been quite unclear there about what he actually ended up using it for, that will irritate a lot of people outside of his own patch. And if you look at his own personal approval ratings around the country, they're quite poor. Clacton, where he is personally popular and where we've had a long run of by-election activity because of, you look at Douglas Carswell's by-election stuff in 2014, they were more likely to vote for Farage than the bin, but they did not come out in large numbers by any means. I think it's right that the major parties said, I'm sorry, we're leaving you to this. This is a massive vanity project and a colossal waste of money because you're trying to avoid scrutiny, and we're not participating. So I think that they've done themselves some damage that they haven't quite realised yet. OK, but take us to the split on the right then. You seem to be saying that Reform is losing out a bit. The support was not as good as it should have been in Manchester. If that is the case, is anybody gaining on the right, or has that vote gone to Andy Burnham? So interestingly, I don't think the vote has made up its mind where it's going to go. But the popularity of the individuals, Kemi Badenoch is significantly more popular than Nigel Farage is as an individual in the head-to-head polling that they do on the leaders. She doesn't appear to have converted that quite yet into a matching popularity for the party itself. But I think that that has a chance of coming over the course of the next couple of years if Andy Burnham doesn't call an election in the next 12 months, which he might do. Yeah, indeed he might. So there's a chance that that may happen. But at the moment, things look a bit grim on the right, don't they? Because the vote is split three ways, and that is the way to lose out to the left. I think I don't think it's accurate to say the vote is split three ways across the entire country. Restore are more popular than Reform had considered and had given them credit for. But Restore is largely based around one individual, which is Rupert Lowe, who is personally very popular and very likeable, frankly, in some ways that Nigel Farage is not with certain sections of the population. But there's also a lot of people who back Restore who, once they get out onto the doorsteps to try and convince people to vote for them, will be very heavily disliked because they are not particularly nice people. And he's picking up a lot of that, what I would describe as sort of ex-BNP vote, which I think he has to be very, very careful of. And that's a vote that really wasn't going anywhere to Reform or the Conservatives. It was just kind of festering on the right. But I think most of what's going to happen with the right over the course of the next couple of years is around where the individual leaders end up in the next 3 years. And Kemi Badenoch is currently leading the pack in that arena. Bill Rammell, speaking to us from the left, what do you make of the split on the right? I imagine you must be quite jubilant about it.
Well, do you know, Michael, it's got echoes to me in reverse of the situation when you were in government in the 1980s, when the Tories got landslide election victories on the back of a split between the Labour Party and the then Liberal SDP alliance. And I think the right is fractured. You look at the evidence, the Tories are never going to go below 17% of the vote.
That's a bold prediction.
No.
So optimistic.
I think there's a die-hard Tory vote that is about 16-17%. So the Tories are not going to go below that figure. Restore which in any terms is an extreme right-wing phenomenon, are going to get 3 or 4% of the vote. And Reform have gone down from 32% to about 23%. And Labour, with the Burnham bounce, has gone up. Now, I've always felt that the most likely winner of the next general election is Labour, because we've got a fractured political system, and Labour only needs to get to 31, 32% of the vote to win quite a comfortable majority. And the way the votes on the right is split, I think is fueling that. And, you know, there were 2 polls last week, and you can't overrate it.
The only poll that matters is the one
Absolutely,
on
but,
day.
you know, 2 polls, one a 7% Labour lead, one a 9% Labour lead. I tell you what, if that carries on to September, I think Andy Burnham's going to be very tempted to go to the country in October. Or November.
Why would he be so tempted? I mean, just let's remind ourselves, he has an enormous majority. He has a mandate that lasts for almost another 3 years. I don't see how the situation on the right gets better. And surely you would only go to an election next year if you thought that somehow the right was going to consolidate and threaten the position that you've just set out. Why on earth would you go for an early election?
Because I think to some extent, given the huge challenges he faces on defence, on social care, none of which were anticipated when the manifesto was written, I think in some senses he would be better managing that with a new mandate. Now, he might not get 172 seats majority, but I think it's plausible that he would get a substantial governing majority. And, you know, actually, if you look with hindsight, 172-seat majority hasn't done the Labour Party too many favours because, you know, you will know with big majorities, you know...
Comes a very fractious internal coalition. It's very hard to manage.
I was going to come to that. Are you seriously saying that you think he'd rather govern with a small majority, which would solidify the party? I mean, it would tell them they absolutely had to support him, otherwise they wouldn't win the vote. Are you saying that he'd rather have a small majority than a large one?
I think he would most certainly want a majority of at least 80 or 90 seats, but that might be more manageable than a 170-odd majority. You know, we'll see what happens over the next few weeks, the next few months, but I think it is going to be tempting. And to go early, and I think back to 2007 when I was a Labour minister and Gordon Brown was contemplating going to the country early on the back of a poll bounce when he became Prime Minister. Gordon ducked that. I think Andy has demonstrated, for example, going for the Makerfield by-election, which all the polls suggested he couldn't win, he's a risk taker. And I think he might go for it.
Lauren, what do you make of the plethora of new policies coming out of Reform? There was one last week about the Royal Navy being used to stop the migrant boats. Now they're talking about taking $50 billion off welfare. First of all, why is there a plethora of policies coming out? And secondly, what's the effect on the public?
I don't know that they're having too much attention paid to them around the specifics of these policies yet. I think if they hold to them and they continue to talk consistently with message discipline about them into the autumn and into sort of the Christmas area, then yes, they'll start to really cut through on the detail to individual voters. The welfare system in this country is something that somebody has to grapple with. The move from Rishi Sunak's administration to create parity between mental and physical disability within the welfare system has not worked in the way that it was anticipated that it would work. It has expanded it far beyond what was envisaged. It has meant that issues that are neurodevelopmental issues, which should not be in the mental health category in quite the way that they currently are receiving significantly more than I think possibly is healthy for people. There's something about that has to be grappled with, that involves some very uncomfortable conversations with some very vocal campaign groups who are going to be deeply unhappy with what's being proposed. When it comes to the Royal Navy, if we would like to use the Royal Navy in warfare that is legal and ethically defensible anywhere in the world, we can't start using them illegally and illegitimately in the Channel. War with France, which is something I joke about enormously because it's, you know, we're never better than when we're fighting the French, is not something we can actually do because we start storming the beaches over migrant issues. We cannot use the Royal Navy in the way that Farage is suggesting that we can, but it's very comforting to a lot of people in this country to believe that we should do.
I mean, Bill, Andy Burnham faces this big problem with the continuing problem of the boats. We used to call them small boats, but they're getting bigger and bigger.
The size of 737s now.
Indeed they are. He said that he'd heard all about this during the Makerfield by-election. He is dogged by this issue. Do you think reform will cut through with this Royal Navy interception policy?
Well, firstly, I think the government is making progress on the small boats. The numbers are down by 43%. We're heading for the lowest number since 2020, but further progress needs to be made. In terms of reform, I think the risk for them is these policy proposals are scattergun and don't bear scrutiny. You know, I've just been listening on your channel to Alexander Downer, the former Australian Foreign Minister, who I worked with when I was a Foreign Minister. He was a member of the hardline Australian government that really tackled illegal immigration, and he was just pouring scorn on Farage's plan.
Because of illegality.
Because of illegality.
Also the government's, by the way, because he says you have to have offshore processing of migrant applicants, yes.
Which also I think is a good idea. In terms of welfare reform, I'm in favour of welfare reform. I regret the government under Keir Starmer didn't grip it. But I think if you're serious about it and alongside that you're going to have fairness in the system, you can maybe save 10, at a stretch, £15 billion. £50 billion a year, which reform is proposing, there's no way, shape or form you can do that without massively disadvantaging disabled people who are in genuine need. And I think what they're doing through this scattergun approach is they are genuinely worried. You know, they've come down in the polls. Nigel Farage's personal rating has absolutely bombed. It's now at minus 46%. And they're trying to fill that worrying vacuum with noise, and I don't think it will ultimately bear fruit.
But I think what's interesting about Labour's response to that is, and going back to what you two were talking about earlier, I think both of you are coming at this from too English a perspective. Labour has an enormous problem in both Wales and Scotland. It cannot win number 10 without both Wales and Scotland being repaired, which at the moment is not what's happening. If Labour wish to have a 40 or 30 seat majority, they cannot be doing as badly in Wales and Scotland as they currently are, because they're not doing well enough in England to be able to get there.
But Lauren, you would have said that about Greater Manchester when Burnham stood to be a candidate. He should have been blown out of the water,
Greater
and it
Manchester
changed.
Doesn't have a nationalist party in Plaid Cymru and the SNP.
I have to stop you there. I think Lauren has raised a very interesting point, so much so that I might even dedicate a panel to that on a future occasion. For the moment, I thank Lauren McKevitt and Bill Remmel, and they will return at noon to discuss the ethics of directing illegal immigrants to leafier locations, as the Prime Minister appears to suggest. And coming up, immediately, a new report slams Britain's foreign policy towards Iran. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. A new report argues that Britain's response to the Iran crisis and the war with the United States earlier has revealed decades of institutional decay in British foreign policy making. Research for Policy Exchange, and that research led by Professor Ali Ansari, argues that our inactive foreign policy left the United Kingdom sidelined at a moment when its historical ties to the Gulf should have given us real influence. He also claims that Iran's threats to Britain are not distant, instead suggesting that there is a real threat already on our streets. And Professor Ali Ansari, who's a senior fellow at Policy Exchange and the professor in the School of History at the University of St Andrews, joins me now. Professor Ali Ansari, very good to see you. Welcome to GB News. Shall we start by asking ourselves, what do we think are Iran's objectives with its foreign policy? And amongst those objectives, how do they affect the United Kingdom?
So, I mean, Iran has, among its different sort of members of its revolutionary elite, it has a number of objectives. One is clearly the survival of the regime, but the other is also the expansion of its revolutionary ideology. And it seeks basically, if you look at its policy throughout the region and also more internationally, it has sought to basically convey this sort of its revolutionary vision for the world and its new world order, as you will, further afield. And this is where we come in, of course. I mean, I think this is where Europe becomes, and the West overall becomes part of the battleground. And of course, it's been somewhat sort of empowered and enabled by recent events as far as it sees it. I mean, it sees that it's resisted the United States, and therefore it's now sort of seeking to project its power further afield. And this idea that the Persian Gulf is some sort of distant place which is of no relevance to the United Kingdom is a huge mistake. I mean, it's one of those sort of fallacies, I think, of foreign policy and British foreign policy in particular, in which we're not particularly interested in these sort of distant places because they don't affect us, but clearly it does.
What should the Foreign Office understand about Iran, and what attitude should that bring about?
I think in the first place, I mean, the Foreign Office, but also the policy-making establishment has to understand Iran as a revolutionary power that sees as its role the undermining of the international order. It doesn't want to play by the rules. It wants to change the rules and it wants to reforge the rules. So once you understand that sort of ideological element, we can move away from, I think, some of the problems that policy has, which is that actually our disputes with Iran are really due to some sort of great misunderstanding. It either has to come from sort of historical events for which we have to feel tremendous guilt and have to constantly be apologizing for, and really giving the revolutionary regime in Iran the benefit of the doubt. I think what we need is a policy that puts British interests front and center, and we understand what we want. Obviously, you're not always going to get what you want, but I think we have to stop sort of turning the other cheek as far as Iran is concerned, and to understand that they desire to do us harm.
I mean, one element may be our attitudes, and the attitudes in the Foreign Office may be wrong from your point of view, but another is actually what firepower we have. I mean, in the recent events, it took us about 3 weeks, didn't it, to send a ship as far as Cyprus, where our interests were under attack. So to what extent are you saying this is because we have the wrong points of view, the wrong policy objectives? And to what extent is it that we're just now very militarily weak?
Well, I think it's a collective thing, and it's you know, what I've looked at obviously is specifically at, you know, the foreign policy establishment. But of course, that isn't limited to the Foreign Office. I mean, you know, there are other elements of HMG that deal with that, and of course, the MOD, the Cabinet Office, and others are all a part and parcel of this process. And I think it's quite clear, and it's one of the points I've sort of highlighted in the report itself, that this ability to express soft power, of which we take great pride in, isn't really as effective when we have no credible hard power to sort of to project. And I think it looks, you know, it looks weak. I mean, it is weak, actually, when you think that in the current crisis, our response was extremely reactive. We sort of jumped around, flailed around a little bit. And, you know, it's a little bit embarrassing, I think, from our perspective, when the Ukrainians were able to send, you know, 200 specialists to advise Arab allies as to what to do in terms of their own attacks. But as you say, you know, we struggled to get a ship, a Royal Navy ship to Cyprus. But worse than that, you know, we withdrew the one minesweeper we had in the region, and I think it's still, you know, sitting around in British waters at the moment. So it's you know, our preparation, I think, was extremely poor.
We have relations, important relations with certain Gulf states, friendly relations. What should we be doing about those relations? And during that crisis, what could we have been doing?
I think that in the first instance, you know, our problem was that we were too preoccupied in many cases with other problems that were taking place, not least with, you know, the crisis over Mandelson in Washington and so on and so forth. So we didn't really have a very strong voice there dealing with the Americans. But also, you know, our issue was we were so diverted that we weren't really paying attention to what needed to be done in terms of cultivating and reassuring Arab allies as to what we would and would not do in the region. It's one thing to say, and I think it's entirely fair to say, that we're not going to participate in the military conflict. I don't think we could have anyway, but, you know, the fact is that we weren't going to participate in that. But we should have, I think, been more front-footed about providing support for Arab allies who were basically coming under attack, you know, through no fault of their own.
What threat does Iran offer today on the streets of Britain and in the cyberspace in Britain? In other words, you know, what is it doing on the internet? What are its activities there that are a threat to us?
Well, I think there are a number of threats that they pose, and we've seen this from the security services who have foiled a number of attacks, you know, that potentially were going to take place on the streets of Britain. But I think you're quite right, you know, to highlight this other aspect, which is the sort of the ideological struggle that takes place and its ability to project its message, I think, onto the streets effectively of Britain through internet connectivity. And it sends this message, and we don't really push back enough. I mean, this is another thing that I've been, you know, arguing, and it's not simply, you know, on the basis of recent events, but I've highlighted in the report as well that, you know, we don't respond coherently enough to many of the challenges that Iran poses to us, some of the sort of misinformation, disinformation. We saw how involved they were, for instance, in promoting Scottish independence, for instance. I mean, you know, there was a bit of a joke that when the internet went down in Iran, a lot of interesting social media pundits suddenly also went off air, who were all vigorously in support of the breakup of the United Kingdom. Well, this sort of thing needs a response. It doesn't cost a huge amount to do, but it requires a bit of effort and it requires a bit of focus. And I don't think, frankly, you know, we've been so focused on issues of the nuclear crisis. You know, these are very legitimate things to look at, but they are part of a wider issue and a wider problem that we need to be contending with.
Ali Ansari, thank you very much indeed for joining me on this Sunday morning.
Thank you.
A British government spokesman said, "We have introduced a comprehensive set of measures aimed at countering threats posed by the Iranian regime, including sanctioning the IRGC in its entirety and more than 550 Iranian individuals and entities." Last month, the IRGC was designated as a security threat under landmark new legislation, equipping the police and intelligence services with more powers to disrupt and prosecute those working or supporting them. And again, many thanks to Ali Ansari. Now, coming up, the government claims that making tax digital is a useful modernisation. But is it? This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Yes, there will be some sunshine for some of us in the south today, but overall there will be quite a lot of cloud, and the further north you go, there's a chance of some showery rain in places too. That's courtesy of this weak area of low pressure and these fronts that are just starting to drift their way southwards across the UK over the next 24 hours. So it will be northern parts of the UK that generally see the thickest cloud through the rest of Sunday afternoon, and the cloud will bring some bits and pieces of rain at times, more especially over the high ground and more western parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, the skies will brighten for many parts of England and Wales, and whilst it won't be as sunny or as hot in the very far south as yesterday, it will still be very warm, temperatures still above average, highs of 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. Not quite as warm further north, and as I say, this evening will be fairly damp for northern parts of Scotland. Some bits and pieces of mostly light rain and drizzle off and on, particularly over the higher ground where there will be some low cloud giving quite misty, murky conditions in places. Perhaps turning more generally wet across parts of Northern Ireland with more general spells of rain and drizzle arriving here. But many parts of England and Wales will end the weekend on a dry note once again, and there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and the southwest. Overall, though, through tonight, there will be quite a lot of cloud around across the UK, and even in the south, we could see one or two spots of rain and drizzle from the thickest cloud, but I don't think it will amount to very much at all. And generally speaking, by the end of the night, it will be these western areas, high ground, Wales, southwest England, where we'll see the greatest chance of some rain and drizzle. Quite a warm night to come, though, in the south, in particular, 16 or 17 degrees in the towns and cities, and actually fairly mild further north too. So Monday dawns on a relatively cloudy note for many. Perhaps some bits and pieces of rain, mainly in the west and the north, and certainly turning wetter through the afternoon across the northwest. So Northern Ireland and Western Scotland are seeing some pretty wet conditions as we go into the afternoon. But a more humid day for many. Temperatures into the high teens and low 20s in the north, perhaps 26 to 28 degrees in the south.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in, the Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages. Because the news is going to happen. So get a head start today. Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. HMRC's new digital tax regime forces self-employed workers and small business owners to file returns 6 times a year instead of once, using government-approved software only that can cost taxpayers hundreds of pounds annually. The government says it's part of the tax system being modernised and closing the gap between what tax is due and what tax is actually paid. But many using the new scheme have described it as agonising. And joining me now is the economist Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Welcome back to GB News.
Pleasure.
Tell me, first of all, what is the objective as far as the government is concerned? What have they said is the reason for doing this?
Well, they've begun there's a gap between what they think they should be getting and what's actually there. So where is this gap? Can they actually try and make sure they actually fill that? And what's the best way of doing it? And the answer is come back to us and actually say, right, you fill all this in, and therefore it's now your problem. And if there is going to be a gap there, we'll come chasing back to you afterwards. Sounds quite straightforward. Until, of course, you actually look at how they're going about it. What it means is the individual is going to have to sit down 4 times a year actually having to actually fill out details of what's going on, not just income, but expenses, and then twice a year, then having to do a whole summation of that. And then you actually hope that's right. Now, quite a lot of details on that, and like for most individuals, they're going to start making mistakes. So questions are going to start coming back. And if you're doing that every single quarter, I can guarantee that within a year, most people are going to be sitting there saying, I don't understand what's going on here, help me. The only people who can help them will be their accountants, who if they've got any sense, will be actually trying to provide more services to the likes of us trying to run our businesses and run our own accounts and be able to take the problem away from us.
The data has to be submitted using government software.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about your experience in using the government software.
Almost impossible. Trying to actually sit there and try and identify how it should be operated. Most of us aren't very good at using software. Particularly, so my generation, where you actually came through and we were going back to the days of the early Apples and things like that, most of us really never really progressed much from that. So when you're trying to deal with something like this, it should be put in a way which really idiots like me should be able to understand it, to be able to actually take it through, or at least be able to say, right, that goes wrong, what do I do next? There's very little of that. Instead, you make a mistake and you have to go back and then try and actually find out what's gone wrong. It's very, very complicated indeed. I'm sure the next generation coming through will find it possibly, maybe not enjoyable, but certainly easy compared to me.
In some way, this links to your bank account, the bank account of your business or businesses. Tell me about that.
Now, the idea being with that is to actually try and make sure, and this is a sensible idea, how much money has been seeped out of businesses into your private side. So you could easily say, well, how many people have been having several bank accounts, business, private, maybe it was a buy-to-let, something like that. And so costs being added in, income being seeped out. So actually try and control all of that. The logic is quite straightforward. However, this has been designed by accountants, I suppose. So technically it's right, but no one's actually sat down and said, right, excuse me, can we sit down in front of the average person trying to pay tax? Does this actually work? How does it work? And if it goes wrong, what do they do? You've got to make tax not just simple, acceptable, so that people say, OK, I know I've got to pay the tax. How do I go about it? And make it so that I feel I'm actually, not actually being patronised and actually paying my fair dues for it. At the moment, it's actually seeing as a penalty, not just having to pay the tax, but a penalty trying to get the wretched thing in.
But then it is supposed that every item in your bank account is an item of interest to the tax authorities, and then you have to eliminate those from your bank account, which go straight into the calculation. You have to eliminate the ones that you think are irrelevant. Is that right?
That is. So actually, they can then go through and start questioning all those items, which is an interesting point. So if you after people who are actually trying to take money into them from other sources, or doing any laundering or something like that, it's an interesting way of actually trying to trap that. Understood. But also what you're then trying to do this is an awful lot of detail to try and catch a few people doing money laundering, which you need to be going after, trying to penalise the rest of the nation who are just trying to get that straightforward tax sorted out. It's a question of scale. If you're actually doing it in relatively small amounts, then why should we be bothering with all of this? You just need individuals doing it. Over a certain scale, you can sit there and say, right, come on, now we need to have a greater detail. I'm afraid it's one of those where the software hasn't caught up with actually the applications that we need to be able to make it simple, straightforward and acceptable. You've always seen, go back in history, when people when they can't pay tax, they tend to actually just start having a revolution about it. This is not just not paying tax because it's unfair, it's not paying tax because the system is unfair.
But you make a good point there. If it's as bad as you say, why isn't the country up in uproar?
It's only just started. You wait for this to actually try and work its way through a year, and then you actually sit there and someone's going to sit down and say, this is what we expected, this is what we've had coming through. And they then start turning around to individuals and saying, what's been happening here? The first questions will go to the accountants, and the accountants will try and give the answers, then it go back to the individuals. And so it'll take a year or so before the questions start coming out. It's the very fact that people ask people at the moment who are actually trying to look after their own tax affairs at the moment, I don't know anybody who fully understands it, that it's only going to be a matter of time before this does come back and bite them.
And meanwhile, governments are always saying, almost routinely, aren't they, that they're trying to make life easier for business, that they're always trying to cut out bureaucracy and red tape. And here is much more red tape and much more expense.
Yes, and it makes it totally illogical. Make tax systems on the basis that as you're actually earning it, you pay tax. That's always been the easy way. So by the time you get the money, the tax is already gone. And therefore, actually do it that way. Then you can actually after that, come back and then you make any adjustments as necessary. By doing these sort of photographs every few months, and then coming back, and then actually checking it against the bank accounts and things like that, it is incredibly complicated. That's what you need a computer to do, not the human to try and do.
Well, thank you very much, and very good luck to you, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, and very good luck to me as well. Coming up, 50 police chiefs have called on the Prime Minister to prevent the early release of PC Harper's killers. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. The heat wave across Europe will gradually be easing over the next few days, still staying very dry for many areas though, Spain and Portugal included. We may see some isolated showers across parts of France, but it's really across the Alps, parts of Italy where we could see some intense downpours, some thunderstorms, bringing some hail and also some frequent lightning. Still remaining very dry as we head into next week, along with some high temperatures. We could see the mid-30s for some areas.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Music, as anybody knows, from Scotland or Ireland, it is very, very important to us all here. Most of us can lift a musical instrument, and actually there's a great children's band on stage at the minute, but I've managed to capture some people here. Where are you from?
We're from Dungannon.
And why are you here at the Fla?
We're here just for the music, the atmosphere, and just the all-round celebration. It's a very proud moment for Belfast, and it's lovely to have the children out on their summer holidays. And I have a daughter who is playing and another one who's coming along to sing.
Well, let's hear you play. What are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play in the chair.
Well, go ahead.
Thank you.
The People's Channel, Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
People that have lived in London have chosen to move out because they don't feel... It's not about feeling safe as much. It's about feeling that they don't recognise London as the capital city of England anymore.
Well, I can't answer for those people. I mean, I think, there are places all over the country that change. There is a constant churn. There are parts of London that were once terribly, poverty-stricken and that are now gentrified and are full of completely different places, to the point that local people, local communities have been squeezed out. There are places, which have changed because the demographic changes. But, I mean, that happens everywhere.
You can say that about Bradford, you can say that about parts of Birmingham and these kind of things, some of these areas as well. But if you look at London, it's always been a bit of a melting pot.
Yeah.
It's the capital of a trading nation. It's why we have one of the best stock exchanges in the world, why we have the most investment, foreign investment into this country.
The People's Channel. Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Michelle, how do you feel when you look back at that 5 years there, from where we first started in and out of those lockdowns?
Well, I've got to say, right, first things first. I've worked on live TV for half a decade and I still forget to talk into a microphone.
Easily done.
What can I say? Well, you look back on some of that and you actually forget some of the absolute ridiculousness that has gone on in the last 5 years. And I think you summed it up well. When you go back to that period of the lockdown, the ridiculous control, the enforced vaccine mandates, you could feel like you was just going mad in your own little world. And to me, GB News, we really, really came into our own.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. 50 police chiefs have called for the Prime Minister to prevent the early release of the killers of PC Harper. Andy Burnham says that he's instructed the Justice Secretary, Alex Norris, to find more prison spaces so that the pair can remain in jail. And that comes in the same week that the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, issued an apology for the case of Simon Levy. He's the serial sex offender who was released on bail by a court that had not been informed that he was being investigated for rape and murder. How strained is the current relationship between the justice system, our politicians and the police? The former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, joins me now. Michael, very good to see you. Welcome
Michael,
back.
good morning.
We do seem to be in a bit of a mess. Shall we deal with prisoner release first of all? Is it your view that Alex Norris, who's now been instructed by the Prime Minister to go off and do better, can find a solution that will keep the killers of PC Harper in jail?
Yes, I think if he looks for a solution and takes proper advice and acts robustly, there are solutions available. But I'm afraid I think that ministers are being given the runaround here, and that I think the blob is operating, whether for ideological reasons or reasons of competence, to say that there aren't any solutions. We've heard mixed messages from Number 10, who on one day last week said that any idea of blocking the removal of PC Harper from PC Harper's killers from the list of people due to be released was a non-starter, was impossible. And then later, Andy Burnham said that he's confident that it can be arranged. So there's mixed messaging, there's a level of incompetence here, there are clear solutions to dealing with this issue. One of them would be a primary piece of legislation that could separate out any cohort or category of prisoner that they no longer wish to release under this early release scheme. Another is to deal with the commencement of the legislation that has already been passed. So there are solutions. Why this is proving to be difficult, frankly, can only be explained by a degree of incompetence as well as an ideological base, I suspect. But it's reflective of a serious breakdown in confidence in our criminal justice system as a whole.
You think ministers are being given the runaround. It may be that ministers are not being insistent enough, that they're not sending the advice back enough times, that they're not seeking outside advice, which after all they're entitled to do.
Yes.
They don't have to rely only on what their civil servants tell you. Tell me what you think the ideological element of the bad advice might be, if there is one.
Well, look, we've had a situation in this country where for hundreds of years Parliament is sovereign. If you start off from that process and you understand that a piece of legislation, a primary piece of legislation passed by Parliament is unassailable, then you can do pretty much what you want if you can get it through both Houses of Parliament. If you don't believe in that ideology, if you believe in supranationalism, if you believe that international institutions are supreme, or that the Supreme Court, for example, that the Blairite institution can overrule Parliament, then your mindset is perhaps different from that which it should be. If you want an actual solution to this, then you say, we can pass a piece of legislation, rather like they did after the English Civil War in 1660, a piece of legislation called the Indemnity and Oblivion Act, which actually named individuals who were excluded from a general amnesty. The Act itself listed some names and said these people are not given an amnesty. Everybody else is excused for their offences. The following people will be punished. Those people were later executed by the state. So clearly there's long historical precedent for this. Why they cannot say, let's pass an emergency piece of legislation when we come back in September and separate PC Harper's killers and perhaps other cohorts of people from the legislation that they've already passed. It's a short-term solution or an individual solution for that particular problem. There are obviously endemic, systemic problems in the criminal justice system, like underinvestment in the prison service, which is going to take longer to solve.
How literal are you being there? Are you telling us that legislation could exclude certain people from the amnesty, or are you simply saying that we could legislate to say, for example, that those who have been convicted of manslaughter, which involved the death of a police officer, that these people are excluded?
Either. That's a question of ministerial preference. You could do either. You could separate one group or you could separate named individuals. But that is an option for Parliament. Now, there may be political reasons why the government doesn't want to follow that route. For example, when you introduce a piece of legislation, other parliamentarians can try to attach amendments to your legislation, which could be politically difficult. Maybe that's what's putting Number 10 off that option, because that might create a political embarrassment for them. But we've got a breakdown in the system of our criminal justice. challenges here, largely due to 30 or 40 years of underinvestment. This isn't a recent thing. This is rooted in the fact that our prison estate is falling to pieces. There hasn't been enough investment in it because there have been no votes in prisons, if I can put it that way. We also see an underinvestment in our criminal justice system, where our courts are, in many cases, not functioning, not because of juries. That was a complete misnomer. It is because, in many cases, of bureaucracy around and evidence gathering around technology, but also around the court estate. There are multiple courtrooms not operating every day because the heating doesn't work, the plumbing doesn't work, and so on. So these sorts of things are rooted, and we now see people like the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, and the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, having a public spat because of mistakes like the Simon Levy case, which you mentioned, where clearly there have been mistakes across the board, but we have to look at how to resolve this. And I don't think as I think Mr. Parkinson said, well, it's not helpful for the Met Police Chief to sort of knock seven bells out of each other. But actually, I think it is, because I think it doesn't do any good to the system to circle the wagons. We need to know where the problems are, and everybody needs to address these problems.
Mr. Parkinson said something about devoting more official time or having more officials involved or something. That did not, to me, sound like a solution at all.
No, it's not a solution to introduce more committees, more bureaucracy, more discussions. There are major problems in the Crown Prosecution Service, as there are in the Metropolitan Police Service. These are going to take a systematic change and a change of attitude as well. It's not just a question. The age-old solution is to throw more money at a problem. It isn't that's going to solve this problem. Money isn't the answer to every question. What they have to do is understand the different mindsets involved. There has to be a greater exercise of discretion. There has to be more robustness in decisions that are made about prosecution of cases and which ones are prioritised. There are major issues here. You only need to ask, for example, the Jewish community, where, in the Jewish press in the last several months, there have been itemising how the Crown Prosecution Service and the police have failed them in the pursuance of anti-Semitic offences. That's one of the best examples to highlight failings in the criminal justice system, and they are significant, but that isn't exclusive to that. So I think that this is not about throwing more money at the problem. It is about addressing these issues robustly.
Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder, we don't have time to pursue this further, but it makes me wonder what is going on in our great institutions. Last week and this week we've been discussing Cambridge University as well.
Yes.
And there seems to be a sickness and some ideologies which I think are very rum operating in many of our institutions.
They are woking themselves to death. Our institutions are breaking themselves because of this attitude.
And I wonder also, we were talking about ministers and the advice they receive. Do you think there's less robustness amongst ministers than there was in your day and further back in my day? Less robustness amongst ministers to take on the civil service and say, no, that advice is not good enough. Thank you for that advice.
Yes.
But please redo it. Come to me with a different solution.
I think there is less robustness. And the reality is that people are intimidated when they're given legal advice and they're told repeatedly, oh, you can't do that, it would be unlawful. Rather than challenging it and saying, well, explain to me why that is the case, or I want to get alternative advice, or I want to take a bit more of a risk, and let's see if we lose that case. They just accept it as gospel. And that, I don't think, is healthy. There are cases where, historically, where the system has given advice to ministers that they're likely to fail. They've gone on and tested that, and they found that actually they have not failed in court or elsewhere, that these things have worked. So advice is only advice. What's supposed to happen is that advisors advise and ministers decide. And one does need to be robust to make these decisions.
And of course, another feature nowadays is that if a minister pushes back against advice, there's a good chance that minister might then be accused of bullying because somebody gets offended by the way in which that interaction has occurred. How very good to see you. I should say, just before saying goodbye to you, that Lisa Ramsaran, The chief Crown Prosecutor for the CPS said, "Our actions fell short of the standards that victims, family and the public are entitled to expect. We recognise our responsibility and we're sorry for the shortcomings that were identified." And a government spokesman said that the Prime Minister has asked Justice Secretary Alex Norris to work through further options to keep a greater number of the most serious offenders in prison, including the killers of PC Harper. Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael Ellis. That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Please rejoin me at noon. The panel will be back to debate whether middle-class areas must accept their share of illegal migrants. Somewhere in a new short film shot solo across London, a secret AI shot has been woven in to test whether viewers can spot the difference. I will see you back at noon. Come.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Yes, there will be some sunshine for some of us in the south today, but overall there will be quite a lot of cloud, and the further north you go, there's a chance of some showery rain in places too. That's courtesy of this weak area of low pressure and these fronts that are just starting to drift their way southwards across the UK over the next 24 hours. So it will be northern parts of the UK that generally see the thickest cloud through the rest of Sunday afternoon, and the cloud will bring some bits and pieces of rain at times, more especially over the high ground and more western parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, the skies will brighten for many parts of England and Wales, and whilst it won't be as sunny or as hot in the very far south as yesterday, it'll still be very warm, temperatures still above average, highs of 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. Not quite as warm further north, and as I say, this evening will be fairly damp for northern parts of Scotland. Some bits and pieces of mostly light rain and drizzle off and on, particularly over the higher ground where there will be some low cloud giving quite misty, murky conditions in places. Perhaps turning more generally wet across parts of Northern Ireland with more general spells of rain and drizzle arriving here. But many parts of England and Wales will end the weekend on a dry note once again, and there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and the southwest. Overall, though, through tonight, there will be quite a lot of cloud around across the UK, and even in the south, we could see one or two spots of rain and drizzle from the thickest cloud, but I don't think it'll amount to very much at all. And generally speaking, by the end of the night, it'll be these western areas, high ground of Wales, southwest England, where we'll see the greatest chance of some rain and drizzle. Quite a warm night to come, though, in the south, in particular 16 or 17 degrees in the towns and cities, and actually fairly mild further north too. So Monday dawns on a relatively cloudy note for many. Perhaps some bits and pieces of rain, mainly in the west and the north, and certainly turning wetter through the afternoon across the northwest. So Northern Ireland and Western Scotland are seeing some pretty wet conditions as we go into the afternoon. But a more humid day for many. Temperatures into the high teens and low 20s in the north.
It's the final week to see how you could win over £65,000 in prizes.
You could be our latest Great British Giveaway winner.
First of all, we want to give you
£60,000 in tax-free cash, plus you'll also receive a fine gold bar worth over £5,000.
For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
We can allow.
Stop.
You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up? About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
May I be amongst the first to wish you a good afternoon. In his novel, The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck describes how the wind blew the crust off the earth and the earth cracked and the trees died of thirst. In a week of drought across the country, I offer you quenching draughts of thoughtful conversation. The Prime Minister says that illegal immigrants should be sent to live amongst the middle classes, not just to the grimmest places my panel will discuss. Somewhere in a new short film shot solo across London, a secret AI shot has been woven in to test whether viewers can spot it. And the creator's real motivation is to ask a deeper question about the value of human work in the new AI world. Stephen Keriazis will review the new theatre production of Game of Thrones at Stratford-upon-Avon. And Google searches suggest that people were worried that they'd damaged their eyes looking at the eclipse. Would it have been worth it? All of that and more with your Sophia Windsor. Here we go.
Good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock. These are your headlines. Reform UK has unveiled plans to save £50 billion a year by abolishing disability benefits for millions of people. Reform's Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick is set to publish the details tomorrow as part of a 50-page paper called Making Welfare Work. Mr Jenrick compared the current system to suicidal empathy and said it's time for the biggest welfare shake-up for a generation. It comes as Nigel Farage looks to end hosepipe bans for good, with a plan to build more reservoirs and slash water-saving targets. Meanwhile, it's understood Ofwat is considering allowing water companies to charge consumers higher prices during droughts. Under the proposed plans, firms will be allowed to impose surge pricing and factor water scarcity into bills as part of a drive to reduce consumption. Speaking to GB News this morning, Deputy Reform leader Richard Tice had this to say.
The idea that a relatively small island that has substantial rainfall for large chunks of the year, apart from the last couple of months, should constantly be looking at hosepipe bans, surge pricing, which is another disgraceful idea that's being put forward. This isn't progress at all. This is negative can't-do nonsense. We at Reform can-do attitude. We can get reservoirs built. We can ensure that our water companies do the job properly, of stop having so many leaking pipes, losing billions of litres of water every year. You know, the truth is that Britain's broken, our pipes are broken, our water companies are broken. We'll fix it.
At least 5 people have been killed and more than 10 injured in Ukraine in the latest wave of Russian strikes, according to officials there. The attack comes in retaliation after a Russian space centre was blown up by Ukraine yesterday. Moscow's mayor said about 600 Ukrainian drones were launched towards the city overnight, leaving at least 1 person dead. It comes as British drones are being used by Ukraine to strike targets on the Russian mainland for the first time since the war began in 2022. Weapons made by 2 UK companies have been supplied to Ukraine, whose forces use them as part of a deep strike campaign to hit industrial and military targets. A fundraiser in memory of former University of Cambridge professor Jason Arday has raised more than £40,000. Prime Minister Andy Burnham described the professor's death as a tragedy on so many levels and a really sad and sorry state of affairs. Arday, who resigned from the university following allegations of plagiarism, was pronounced dead after emergency services were called to an address in South London on Friday. Police say the 41-year-old's death is being treated as unexpected but is not believed to be suspicious. Yesterday, a Windrush campaigner launched a GoFundMe page in Dr. Arday's memory, which has received more than 1,000 donations. A number of people have died and others have been seriously injured after a head-on collision between 2 cars on a motorway in County Kildare, according to Irish police. 2 cars collided on the M9 between junction 3 and 4 at around 3 a.m. this morning. One of them was travelling southbound on the northbound carriageway of the motorway. The BBC is reportedly attempting to subpoena members of Donald Trump's family to defend itself from the £7.5 billion defamation lawsuit issued by the US president. The case was filed by Mr. Trump over an edit of a speech he made on the 6th of January 2021, which was aired in a BBC documentary. It's understood Mr. Trump's legal team have said the BBC intentionally defamed President Donald Trump, and now the BBC is seeking to harass him. The BBC denies defaming Mr. Trump. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll have more for you in half an hour.
Thank you, Severe Winsler. Andy Burnham appears to admit that the flow of illegal immigrants, which he cannot control, is a burden on those communities where they are settled. Otherwise, he wouldn't be proposing to disperse them to wealthier areas. Will the move win votes in working-class areas, which probably just want immigration to be stopped? Does it make sense to share the blight between run-down areas and leafier locations? Can illegal immigrants look forward to living in Chelsea and Alderley Edge? My panel has returned the former Conservative advisor, Lauren McEvatt, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Bill, what do you make of it? First of all, the ethics and the morality. Do we all have a moral obligation to share this burden?
I think we do, actually. But let's come back to the beginning. The government is committed to reducing migration. You know, the small boat crossings are down by 43%, heading towards the lowest figure since 2020. But whatever progress you make, there are always going to be a number of migrants that need housing, albeit now in former military bases rather than in hotels, which, you know, I think the public are generally supportive of. But what Burnham said this week was more nuanced than the headlines. He said it cannot be right that it's only the poorest areas in the country that receive asylum seekers. And it's actually been the policy of successive governments, both Tory and Labour, since the late 90s to disperse asylum seekers across the country. But it hasn't happened. You look at the evidence, Michael, and they are predominantly housed within the poorest areas of the country. And I just don't think that's right and fair.
You've mentioned before that the numbers are going down, and it's true that the numbers are less at this point this year than they were at this point last year. However, the weather conditions, oddly enough, have not been so good for crossings this year, and I can't find anybody who can explain to me what policy changes have been made that have led to the decline in the number. If we were able to identify that, we could do more of that. So I think you may live to rue the day when you're arguing that the numbers have come down. But even so, you know, it's not unusual to get 2,000 in a week. We've got today the story of a village of, 300 and something people, and maybe they're going to have 2,000 illegal immigrants descend upon them. That could be 1 week's worth of arrival of migrants by boat. So, saying that the problem is getting better, I don't think is going to help us very much in understanding this problem.
I'm not in any sense complacent, but you know, we've now got 8 months worth of evidence this year with the numbers consistently falling. That hasn't happened.
No, they haven't consistently fallen.
Well, yeah, okay, but
and we've had the big boat issue now. So I mean, some weeks they've been very high, and we have a phenomenon of the travelling much bigger boats.
But we've got 8 months of evidence of the numbers falling, and there's never been a period like this since 2020 when the numbers have come down that much. Now they need to go further. In terms of why it's happened, I think one, it's the legal remedies that the government has put in place to actually take on and tackle some of the gang leaders, and there have been prosecutions. I think also, and you know, there's a lot of pillorying of the French, but you know, the UK border force chief, I think it was last week or the week before, gave evidence saying that the French police had intervened 10 times since the spring on small boats and have pushed them back to the French coast. So I think it's things like that that are beginning to make a difference.
Bill, if we're going to distribute them to leafier areas, it's going to cost more.
Yeah, but look, you know, go to Liverpool, which has got one of the highest concentrations of asylum seekers, and explain to people there why those communities, amongst the poorest in the country, with the biggest strain on local council resources, should disproportionately take asylum seekers, however much you bring the number down.
But what I mean is, you think it's a good idea to spend more money to put them into more expensive areas?
I'm not if the move is taking place to house them in former military bases, I don't think the costs in terms of an increase are as high compared to if you were housing them in houses of multiple occupation or hotels. So yes, I think there will be some increase, but I don't think it's as dramatic as being projected. But Michael, it's an issue of basic fairness. It has to be wrong that we concentrate asylum seekers, whatever the numbers, in the poorest areas of the country. And I actually think most people would support that contention.
That's interesting. Lauren, first of all, on the moral point, does everyone have a moral obligation to share in this burden?
Yes, and that's why in 2022, under Boris Johnson, we had the dispersal policy introduced, which previously had only been voluntary. So you're right that it had been there since the 90s, but before 2022, it was entirely voluntary whether or not council areas took money doing this. And because lower income council areas had lower money coming in, they were more likely to say, yes, we'll do it because we'll get income from the national government if we agree to do this. Post-2022, you've got a situation where the dispersal policy basically mandates that everything goes further out. And because not enough accommodation could be found, people ended up in hotels, which was being organised by the private companies executing this on behalf of the government, like your Sercos, your Mighties of the world. That obviously encountered enormous difficulty, particularly in Essex, and began to encounter legal difficulties where local communities were taking legal action to try and stop this, which you're now going to see, I think, again with these referenda that are going to pop up. Housing in military bases is probably the right thing to do. The difficulty is a lot of them are in parts of the country where, when this was proposed by Boris Johnson's government and Rishi Sunak's government, the local MPs were Tories who said, not on your life. We're already going to have a tough enough election next time around. Absolutely not. And Burnham's got less of a problem with that because, frankly, a lot of them were already in patches with Labour members of Parliament. It's in his interest electorally to move them out of those areas and into other areas. The bigger problem, I think, the boat issue is a very visible one. There's shots of, you know, Chris Philp in the channel of Nigel Farage. It's a very visible problem. The actual problem that we have is the Boris wave of legal migration who can possibly tip into the indefinite leave to remain category in September, October. And what Andy Burnham is hoping is that announcing the dispersal policy takes away from the fact that he has not reached agreement with his own backbenchers over Shabana Mahmood's proposals to delay their ability to apply for indefinite leave, which is in a September-October deadline this year. He has got an enormous backbench problem brewing with that, and if they don't take Shabana Mahmood's proposals, which is to delay to 10 years, the bigger problem that we have is a significantly larger long-term ILR issue around people who came in on temporary visas under Boris Johnson who now become permanent within the United Kingdom.
You're right to raise that, Lauren, but I'm not quite sure that people do see that as the bigger problem.
It is the bigger problem, but people don't see it as the bigger problem, which is why everyone talks about the boats, which are the lower problem.
Well, I'm not sure they are the lower problem. People who have come in under the Boris wave who've gone into work, they've been recruited, let's say.
But we have data that says that they are not net contributing to the country, that they are, that because they came in with family members, that they are actually a drain on the country rather than a net benefit.
But also
I'm not talking about whether they're a drain or not. They're not sitting in army camps, and they didn't commit a criminal act when they entered the country.
No.
I mean, Bill happily refers to these people as asylum seekers. They are actually illegal immigrants.
Well, they're economic migrants, and we don't have a good definition for what that should look like.
Economic migrants, and it was illegal to enter the country in the way that they did.
Yes.
So they committed a crime when they entered the country. They're not prosecuted for that crime, but nonetheless that is the case. So I don't think you're right, actually, in thinking that people believe that the bigger problem is the Boris wave than the people.
That's not what I'm saying.
boat.
I'm not saying that people believe it. I'm saying that the bigger problem numbers-wise is the Boris wave, but people believe the bigger problem is the Channel.
But the Boris wave is not being accommodated in temporary
In September, it's about to be accommodated in our legal system, economically speaking, when they are not net contributors to the economy.
They're not descending in thousands upon little villages. That's what I'm saying. They're not.
But they're about to. If you look at the local plans that are coming through, particularly in the West Country where I come from, the district authorities, which remember are about to be merged into a unitary authority in Gloucestershire, are being mandated to put 2,000 people into a village that currently has 500 homes in it. This is about to be a problem because of the housing numbers that are being imposed on leafier parts of the country by a centralised local government by a centralised government in London. The Boris wave, numbers-wise, if they are allowed to settle permanently from September and October in this year, is the larger drain on the economy. But visibly, the Channel issue looks like a bigger problem.
I think you're both right.
Thank you.
I think we've got to tackle the indefinite leave to remain issue, and I think Andy Burnham has got to stick to Shabana Mahmood's proposals. But I agree with you, Michael. There's something visceral in terms of people's sense of fairness in seeing boat crossers coming across the sea and then being processed in our country. And that's why the numbers have got to come down. But even if you go back to when I was a minister at the end of the last Labour government and we'd reduced asylum seeker numbers from 100,000 to 20,000 a year, you are still going to have a good number of asylum seekers that need to be housed. And in principle, I think he is right. They're dispersed across the country. One, because that's fair, but two, it actually helps with integration. You know, if you have a huge concentration in our inner cities, in the poorest areas of the country, I think that's a real challenge to integration.
Or what you see is just a larger element of racism spreading out wider across the country and a bigger boon to reform in more constituencies.
Are you not afraid, Bill, of now offending the middle classes? I mean, a very strong part of the Labour vote now is middle class.
I think you need to communicate really effectively what you're doing and why you're doing it. And one of my biggest critiques of Keir Starmer's government is people just didn't have that sense of where we were going, what we were doing and how we were doing it. I think there's a fighting chance that as the numbers come down and we explain the principle of fairness, that it's just not right to dump all these numbers on the poorest areas in the country, I think Burnham will be much more effective at communicating.
I think if those numbers if those numbers come down, people are still not going to feel that enough has been done, because visually within the country they feel like migration is too high, and there's a confusion in most people's minds about whether or not that is legal or illegal migration. And those numbers, unless we grapple with ILR, are not going to come down. And the best way to do it is to tax remittances, because if it's no longer profitable to come here, make money and send it home, people won't come here.
A very interesting additional point. Thank you very much for a lively discussion panel, Lauren McKevitt and Bill Rammell. Coming up, somewhere in a new short film shot solo across London, a secret AI shot has been woven in. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right.
GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel. 5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there.
Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of a matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
the late edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
Because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, late edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, late edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Somewhere in a new short film shot solo across London, there's a moment that never happened. No camera or human was involved. It's just an AI-generated image hidden amongst real ones. Let's take a look at part of the film.
One of these photographs is real and one never happened. 3 seconds. And I'm not going to tell you which.
Might that have been the AI sequence? I'm delighted to welcome JJ Gavai, a senior AI lecturer and film creator whose new short film asks the question, when AI can generate almost anything on demand in unlimited quantities, what still counts as valuable? It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
Tell me in your own words why you made the film.
Well, I teach AI around the world and I talk about it at various places. And I think it's got to the point now that the AI is so ubiquitous, it's just about everywhere. People ask me, where is the point in the film where the AI is shot? That's not the question to ask anymore. It's about discernment now. It's about using AI, but not just to produce more, but to produce better. And that is using critical thinking.
Yeah, so the thing that is of value to you is something that is created by human mind.
Absolutely.
An implement which is able to create and perceive beauty, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the thing is that AI, it can come up with the right words, and they seem to be the right words, but what they are mostly are the most acceptable words or the most acceptable content. But it takes someone with experience of life to understand, you know, the nuances of a message in order to discern that that is worth keeping or that is not worth keeping. But what I worry about is that people are using AI to push out more and more and more of simply adequate. And the boss will say, well, it's adequate, it does it, and that's it. The reason I shot it, by the way, you know, using the old-fashioned tripod and cameras and all the rest of it, because I could have got it done by AI. But that's the whole point, is not to use it.
You're saying, I think, then, that art requires an artist, yes?
Absolutely.
Why is that the case?
Well, because because if AI is, say, the canvas, and someone supplies the paints, it's up to the artist on how to apply the paint to the canvas in order to make a creation which comes from her or from him. But it's not about the canvas or the paint. It's about you, the human.
Yeah. How broadly threatened are artists by AI?
Hugely. But the thing is that one of the problems is that people start off by asking AI to produce something or other, okay? What I suggest is you produce it first. And then go to AI and say, what do you suggest, and stuff like that. Because AI, it bases the data on whatever you put in. Now, surely, if the original data is AI, and then that's going to be what it bases it all on. But if, on the other hand, if it's your stuff, and then it's a very different story.
OK. Could AI write a new Shakespeare play?
AI could write an adequate, and by the way, I teach that in one of my courses.
Is that right?
Yeah, I teach. Could it actually do? I go, to go to be or not to be and stuff like that. And what I do is that I take to be or not to be, and then I say, okay, here's To Be or Not to Be by William Shakespeare. Now, what I want you to do is to rewrite it as Taylor Swift, and in her words of how she would do it. And what it does, it looks at the patterns of Shakespeare and the patterns of Taylor Swift, and it merges them together. Now, is that original? No, it's not original.
No, that clearly is not original. What I'm asking you is whether AI would be capable of originality. If AI has absorbed, which of course it has, all the plays of William Shakespeare.
Of course.
And maybe with a bit of a steer from you and me, maybe we would say, we want to have a comedy, and we want to have 5 characters, and we want to have love interest. Is AI capable of writing a new Shakespeare play?
Adequately, 100%. Adequately. However...
But Shakespeare isn't adequate. Shakespeare is brilliant.
And that's what I'm getting at. That's exactly...
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is it capable of writing something brilliant?
In my opinion, no. However...
Is that only a matter of the stage of development we're at?
That's what I'm about to say, is that, however, what's happened most recently is that the guys in Silicon Valley, they purchased... I'm talking about on bulk. I'm talking about huge bulk, Michael. They purchase old books, antiquarian books. And so what they're doing is they're sucking up all the information. So is it AI or is it not AI? I think there used to be, when I was a kid, an advert for, is it Memorex or is it not Memorex? I think it was for a tape thing or something like that. And you couldn't tell the difference. Well, I think as long as you've got your mind, you've got taste, you've got discernment, then you can tell the difference.
You see, I well understand that an artist feels very much threatened by this, and you've said that's the right thing to be. But as an aesthete, let's say, should I be frightened? If I can get something in the future as good as the Iliad, a new thing, if I can get in the future something as good as a Shakespeare play, why should the aesthete be frightened about this? The aesthete should maybe be welcoming this.
There was a movie called Pulp Fiction, which was based on the idea of Pulp Fiction. Now, with Pulp Fiction, Yeah, I'm talking about the title of the movie. With Pulp Fiction, it's all about mass producing, and by Act 3, by Chapter 4, something is going to happen. So every single book was basically here or there the same. But does that mean that we should stop writing something which is original? No, it doesn't. I think people deserve more. I mean, there's a market for Pulp Fiction, but in a world where people are obsessive with fake news and inauthenticity, I think more than ever, people are yearning for someone who can use AI in an intelligent way.
JJ, goodbye. I think you raised some really interesting questions. Thanks for doing so. Thanks for making the film, which has obviously brought to a head a lot of these arguments and considerations.
Thank you.
Stefan Kyriazis will be up next, and he'll be reviewing the new theatre production of Game of Thrones, which is on in Stratford-upon-Avon. Just before that, your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good afternoon. Your headlines at 12:28. Reform UK has unveiled plans to save £50 billion a year by abolishing disability benefits for millions of people in the biggest welfare shake-up for a generation. Reform's Treasury spokesman Robert Jenrick is set to publish the details tomorrow as part of a 50-page paper called Making Welfare Work. It comes as Nigel Farage looks to end hosepipe bans for good with a plan to build more reservoirs and slash water-saving targets. At least 5 people have been killed and more than 10 injured in Ukraine in the latest wave of Russian strikes, according to officials. The attack comes in retaliation after Kyiv blew up a Russian space centre yesterday. 12 people have been killed and at least 10 have been injured after a Polish tourist bus crashed in Hungary. It's understood the vehicle left the M3 road and went into a ditch and overturned around 1 a.m. local time this morning. Police say it is likely the driver fell asleep and has since been taken into custody. The government has confirmed plans to house up to 1,200 asylum seekers at 3 military bases in Oxfordshire, Suffolk and North Yorkshire. 2 of the sites earmarked for conversion are said to be only a mile away from primary schools, causing local concern. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Yes, there will be some sunshine for some of us in the south today, but overall there will be quite a lot of cloud, and the further north you go, there's a chance of some showery rain in places too. That's courtesy of this weak area of low pressure and these fronts that are just starting to drift their way southwards across the UK over the next 24 hours. So it will be northern parts of the UK that generally see the thickest cloud through the rest of Sunday afternoon, and the cloud will bring some bits and pieces of rain at times, more especially over the high ground and more western parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, the skies will brighten for many parts of England and Wales, and whilst it won't be as sunny or as hot in the very far south as yesterday, it'll still be very warm, temperatures still above average, highs of 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. Not quite as warm further north, and as I say, this evening will be fairly damp for northern parts of Scotland. Some bits and pieces of mostly light rain and drizzle off and on, particularly over the higher ground where there will be some low cloud giving quite misty, murky conditions in places. Perhaps turning more generally wet across parts of Northern Ireland with more general spells of rain and drizzle arriving here. But many parts of England and Wales will end the weekend on a dry note once again, and there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and the southwest. Overall, though, through tonight, there will be quite a lot of cloud around across the UK, and even in the south, we could see 1 or 2 spots of rain and drizzle from the thickest cloud, but I don't think it'll amount to very much at all. And generally speaking, by the end of the night, it'll be these western areas, high ground of Wales, southwest England, where we'll see the greatest chance of some rain and drizzle. Quite a warm night to come there in the south, in particular 16 or 17 degrees in the towns and cities, and actually fairly mild further north too. So Monday dawns on a relatively cloudy note for many. Perhaps some bits and pieces of rain, mainly in the west and the north, and certainly turning wetter through the afternoon across the northwest. So Northern Ireland and Western Scotland are seeing some pretty wet conditions as we go into the afternoon. But a more humid day for many. Temperatures into the high teens and low 20s in the north, perhaps 26 to 28 degrees in the south.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics
First of all, say welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Stefan Kyriazis and his trusty companion Rafa join me now to share their reviews of the week. And I believe you've been as far as Stratford-upon-Avon.
I have, Michael. I went into the wilderness beyond the city, which was very fitting because this is Game of Thrones, which is obviously the George R.R. Martin phenomenon. Massive TV show. There's a spin-off TV show on at the moment, and now we're branching into theatre, and he's done it with the Royal Shakespeare Company, which actually is very fitting when we look at how he writes, where he draws all his material from.
Game of Thrones is hours and hours of content.
Yes.
How has it been reduced to a play?
So this is one specific moment in the histories that we have not seen before on television, and it's talked about in the histories, but we haven't seen it dramatised on page either. So we've got a little video of the guys talking about it first.
And I think one of the reasons that George's books always resonate is because they are about power, and they're about family, and they're about love, and they're about the decisions we make. They are so vivid in George's books. And I think there's something about this particular story which really feels very present and contemporary, actually. It will hopefully this material will bring people to the theatre and they've never been before, and we just want to absolutely knock their socks off and show them what theatre can do.
Well, will it bring people to the theatre, and will it knock their socks off?
It's certainly This is the RSC, and when they put on a show, they really put on a show. So we're in the main theatre at Stratford, which is basically an amphitheatre, and we're piled high. The main story is 17 years before Game of Thrones, the TV show, and it's all the events that started off what happens in Game of Thrones. 17 years is about how long we've been waiting for book 6 in the 7-book cycle. So there's a little bit of worry. That was George Martin there with the bowler hat on. A little bit concerned. He hasn't finished book 6 and 7 is still to go. Huge cruciform stage, all the way through the floor. People thunder down it. There are processions. We're at a tourney, so there's jousting, and we have huge metallic framed horses, a little bit like Warhorse, but not wicker, metal. Knights on top of them, lances, jousts. We have battle scenes later on. Also, balconies kind of come down out of where we're sitting, and people are up there peering down, plotting, discussing. We're in court, we're in intrigues. This is when the entire continent, which is 7 kingdoms, ruled over by the Targaryens, is about to implode into war. And it's all the things that do it. And basically, it's a Romeo and Juliet story. 2 kids from not warring families become warring families, but actually it also brings in King Lear. We saw some pictures there of the mad old king on the throne. He is absolutely mad, very cruel, burns his enemies alive, this sort of thing. It's all swirling around. It's nearly 4 hours. They cut it down from 4.5 hours. So this feels like a bit of an out-of-town tryout. It's absolutely incredible. You can feel they're looking to West End and Broadway. It will be sensational when it's finished. I thoroughly enjoyed it while I was watching it. There are dragons. You see there's a picture of a tree. That's the god's wood, the heart tree. It comes down from above and from below and joins in the middle. Things happen about it. So there's a feeling of epic, myth, history. All wonderful. A lot of the acting's fantastic. The mopey woke brigade can complain that the Starks, the main family who are from the far north and very Viking-y, are all black. I don't care. They were absolutely fantastic, and they were actually the best at delivering the language as well. I would say some of the probably more RSC people, there was a little bit of oft betwixt mayhaps. It was all like, my lord, 'tis over there. And it really grated. And I wasn't the only critic that mentioned that. Whereas some of the younger actors really got stuck into it. So
this is work in progress, you say?
It feels like it. So they had a few problems. They cancelled about 8 of the previews, and it was over 4.5 hours, and they're cutting it down and down and down. It's still a complete show. It's a finished product. I really enjoyed it, but what I'm looking forward to is the fact that they can still tighten, improve, get rid of some of the ofts and betwixts and all this sort of thing, and make it really lean and honed. But for any Game of Thrones fan, it's fantastic. Fantastic. If you're not, it does take a lot of time with exposition, which can clank a little bit, but is very necessary. Guy sat next to me, I didn't know. I asked at the interval, like, have you seen the show? And he's like, no, no, no. And I'm like, are you following it? And he's like, yes, absolutely. So they've done a really good job of putting it all back together for anybody to enjoy. Thrilling. It's basically Shakespeare for the masses, as Shakespeare was, 600 years ago. So I loved it. Absolutely great.
You had a very good time out of town.
I did.
You've got another thing for us.
I have. Now, it's almost sort of the opposite side of the coin. Again, we're in the round, but this is very, very small and intimate. And this is called the Tau of Glass. Philip Glass, the composer. Again, we've got a little trailer clip to give you a bit of a glimpse of it.
Well, those who were not listening on the radio could see the images. We saw there a lot of sheets of music.
Yes.
We saw a sort of puppet going through the air. Do you want to help us to explain
So basically, this is absolutely the opposite, where we had sort of bombast and big sort of world-busting special effects and staging. This is the exact opposite. Sheets of music. Philip Glass is the opera and classical composer. So all the sheets of music are used by 3 puppeteers. They sort of scrunch them up, so it's the steam coming out of a kettle we saw. Or there's a lot of use of sellotape, you saw there. They sellotape it all together into a great big screen, and then they use the old sort of candle and projection trick to create images on a screen. They create a gigantic figure of Philip Glass himself, famous for his very floppy, wavy hair, seated at a piano. It storms all around one guy. So the guy that we saw there, who we also saw basically asleep on the floor at one stage, is Phelim McDermott. So he is sitting in the audience when it starts, and we don't notice. Spotlight on him. He pretends to be startled. We all laugh. And then he starts talking. I didn't know much about him. He is a world-class director. He directs at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. He's directed most of Philip Glass's operas. The My Neighbor Totoro, the huge Japanese hit that's on playing in the West End, he directed that. Massive. You would not guess it from this man. He is so self-effacing, northern lad. And he just starts talking about art. We're here, our phones are switched off, we're joining together, imagination, searching for something together. And this is basically, it all ties into Philip Glass's quest through his life is the source of music. That's what he says he's always trying to do. His music, very famously, is very sort of circular, sort of kind of repetitive, and they absolutely bring up the fact that it often makes people fall asleep, and they welcome that. And actually what it is doing, it's that sort of, it takes you into a slightly hypnotic state. So if it does lull you into sleep, that's fine as well, because you will dream. So what Phelim does is he tells his life story from a young man discovering Glass's music, going to college, falling into the arts and theatre and opera. But he talks about building a garden shed, a glass table that was smashed, his son, who is the puppet, but the puppet is also himself as a young man. And it's meandering. And at times I was like, I don't know where this is going. And at times, like you, I'm like...
You say meandering, entirely scripted, would you say? Or?
I'd say entirely scripted, but appears not to be. So he's just wandering along. And, I'm looking at all these bits of paper going, I kind of get what they're doing, but it's not blowing me away. And then the second act, it all starts coming together. And that final scene we saw there's a grand piano, a Steinway, and it's self-playing. And he does talk about this much earlier in the fact that Philip Glass has now passed. But he wrote the music to this show talking to Phelim. So as they were talking, Glass was tinkering away. And these Steinways can also take the imprint of someone playing. So we have this incredible fine moment. We had all this story, all this wandering, bits of paper, sellotape. And I'm still a bit like, And then the piano is playing, and he lays down and basically goes to sleep for 6 or 7 minutes. And we're sat there listening to incredible classical music. Our minds are wandering. And I feel it's very much, he talks about Glass's music being like a river that has run through his life. And it is very much like let it carry away, submerge, and if you want, start dreaming. It's about the soul, Michael.
Most unusual experience.
I think it's an unusual experience. It takes time to get into, and I'm really, really glad it exists. And that there were so many people there enjoying it and invested in it. That's wonderful.
Where were
on
they?
at Soho Place until early September. Highly recommended as something very different.
What a very positive day from you, Steph.
I have, yeah.
And Rafa, of course. Thank you both for coming in today.
Pleasure.
Coming up, Google searches for terms such as eyes hurt in the United Kingdom jumped by more than 800% on Thursday, following the total eclipse on Wednesday. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. The heat wave across Europe will gradually be easing over the next few days, still staying very dry for many areas though, Spain and Portugal included. We may see some isolated showers across parts of France, but it's really across the Alps, parts of Italy where we could see some intense downpours, some thunderstorms, bringing some hail and also some frequent lightning. Still remaining very dry as we head into next week, along with some high temperatures. We could see the mid-30s for some areas.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
4 heat waves, weeks without meaningful rain. As the UK heads towards one of its hottest summers on record, the pressure is showing here in Sussex, in the fruit growing across these fields.
Well, the impact of the heat is already visible here. This local grower says that if these extreme temperatures continue, this year's harvest may well be smaller in size.
I don't think there's been another period like this in the history. 3 years ago, we had a tremendous heat wave in the middle of harvest. We were unable to get the fruit to cool down quickly enough. The following year we had a very, very light crop, and the same again this year.
GB News, the People's Channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's only all-female chess team, called She Plays to Win, has been promoted to the game's top division, only to be told they must recruit a male player to compete. Now, league rules require every First Division team to include at least one male and one female player, meaning that one of the team's female players could lose her place. I'm joined in the studio by the She Plays to Win chess players, Anusha and Alicia. Great to see you both this afternoon.
Thank you for
So
having us.
sorry about what's going on. You've been promoted, but you might have to lose one of your teammates. What's going on here?
So essentially we have fallen victim to this rule that She Plays to Win, our team, has been promoted to the First Division in our league, but now must have a male player as part of the rules.
GB News, the People's Channel. Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
But that drought is due to long periods, record periods actually, with no rainfall and high temperatures. The areas that are affected, as you say, over half of England, half of the UK affected by that. The areas being East Anglia, Hertfordshire, the whole of London, Thames Valley, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Devon and Cornwall, the West Midlands and Wessex, covering Dorset, Somerset, Wiltshire and Gloucestershire. So a huge area impacted by that drought. There is also that amber heat health alert still in place here. That's in place until tomorrow. And temperatures today in the south could reach up to 35 degrees. So people here in Bognor Regis coming to the coast to cool down.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The number of eye pain-related internet searches has soared following the highly anticipated eclipse on Wednesday. Despite all the warnings not to look directly at the sun, Google searches for things like eyes hurt jumped around 800% in 24 hours after the eclipse. Wednesday was described as the best solar eclipse in decades. I'm going to talk about that to the astronomer Mark Thompson, who joins me now. Mark, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Why would it have been the best solar eclipse in decades? What made it so?
Well, solar eclipses come in a number of different varieties. First of all, you get the total solar eclipse where the sun is completely obscured by the moon, and that's a very different beast. It's much, much more spectacular. It does go very dark, as some people thought this would do so this instance. But a total solar eclipse is very rare. The last one we saw was back in '99. Since then, there have been a number of partial eclipses where just a bit of the sun's obscured, and sometimes that might be 10%, sometimes maybe 20%, or sometimes even 90% of the sun gets obscured. And we've not had a significant partial solar eclipse since parts of the UK saw back in 1999, or that we had to do on Wednesday. So we've not seen anything like this since 1999.
Do astronomers like you simply enjoy these eclipses, or do you learn more each time?
We still can learn from them. Total eclipses give us a much greater opportunity to learn lots of different things about the atmospherics of the sun. But one of the things we can learn from partial solar eclipses is we can learn a very precise refinement of the orbit of the moon, and it has an effect down on us on Earth because it helps us to predict the tidal patterns with a little bit more accuracy. So we do use partial solar eclipses still to learn different things and to refine our knowledge, but for most people, of course, it was just the spectacular sight that it was on Wednesday.
What was your experience of it, Mark? Where were you? What were you doing?
Unfortunately, I was working a lot, so I ended up tearing around from one interview to the next and spending a lot of my time on social media telling people not to use sunglasses, telling them not to use welding lenses, don't use your phone camera because you're going to mess up your camera. And so I spent a lot of my time just doing that, unfortunately. But I was at home at some part of it, and I managed to catch glimpses of it.
What do you make of the warnings not to look at the sun? And I mean, do you think many people have damaged their eyes as a consequence of it?
I think there's a fairly good chance. I've got some work going on in my garden. I was talking to the landscape gardener just a few days ago, and he was talking to a friend of his who had indeed used welding goggles to look at the sun. And just as I was about to say to him, well, he shouldn't have done that, he could have caused himself serious damage, he said, well, actually, he's now still got a red dot in his eye. So I think probably, yes, a lot of people did use inappropriate methods to look at the sun, and even 5% of the solar disk chucking out the immense amount of energy. And don't forget, it's not just visible light, it's infrared light, it's ultraviolet light, all has an impact on the human eye. So I fear that probably quite a few people have done damage, hopefully not irreversible damage, but I fear quite a few people have done so.
The darkness was very extraordinary, wasn't it? I think that may be one of the things that that most excited people and most took them by surprise. And obviously darkness then followed by light. It was like you had a second sunrise. The sun was coming up again where I was in northern Spain in the quite late evening.
Yeah, it was the most peculiar, eerie light. And that was another one of the expectations that unfortunately social media got wrong. And I saw so many posts saying it's going to get really dark, the birds are going to stop singing, etc., etc., etc. When in reality, and as myself and many colleagues tried to spread the word, that it wasn't going to go that dark, but it would go more like an overcast sky, and you might get a slightly different colour hue. And it was at the moment of the deepest part of the eclipse, certainly from here in the UK, in Norfolk, where I was, the light did go a peculiar sort of almost amber hue. It didn't last for long, but it was a strange experience. It's not the same as a total eclipse, but it was still something quite special.
How long do we have to wait for another eclipse that's going to be dramatic?
Unfortunately, for something that's going to be dramatic, we're probably going to have to wait about another 60 years for the UK. Eclipses are seen all over the world every year. So if you're prepared to travel, then you can see a total eclipse nearly, not quite, but nearly every year. We've got partial eclipses almost every year now for the next 10 years, but they're not anywhere near as spectacular as one we've just seen, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think eclipse tourism is quite a thing now. People willing to travel thousands and thousands of miles. So the next total eclipse anywhere in the world, do you have that in your mind, Mark Thompson?
Yeah, it's later in the year next year. I couldn't tell you the exact date, but it's tail end of next year at some point.
Well worth looking up. And you'll be kept very busy again that day, I think.
I think so. I might try and sneak somewhere to try and see this one this time.
Yes. I think I'm not quite sure where I came down on this one. I thought the darkness was an extraordinary experience. I wasn't equipped with the right glasses, so it was very difficult for me to appreciate just what was going on with the sun. I think I had more of the eclipse in northern Spain than we had in Britain, isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely, you will have done. Certainly parts of Spain saw the total eclipse. If you didn't see the total eclipse, you'd have certainly seen a more significant partial eclipse, or even more of the sun would have been blocked from view. But certainly those eclipse glasses, which were like gold dust eventually, and no one could find them, no one was prepared for it, and everybody wanted one, they were superb for looking at the eclipse. It's very quick, very simple, and they happen. Eclipses happen almost on a yearly basis for the next 10 years. If you haven't got any now, grab yourself a pair, you'll be ready for the next one.
I think that may be a very good piece of advice, because when it comes round to it, they really are absolutely gold dust. They're almost impossible to come by. Thank you very much indeed, Mark Thompson, and thanks to all of my guests for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to shelter from the August heat wave with all of you. I will certainly be back next week at the same time. Coming up next on GB News is The Weekend with Dawn Neeson, and therefore, as usual, I say, Dawn, what's coming up on your show?
Oh, thank you, Michael. I love the way you look over the shoulder on the sofa. It's the highlight of my week, and I'm not even joking. That was a great show, and hopefully we've got one coming up as well. I've got a horrific story of how the people smuggling gangs are now deliberately using babies. We saw that image of that tiny baby on the boat. Deliberately using babies to get more migrants over here. We're also revealing the truth about what is going on in Ceuta and the new invasion and the rise in rape in that area. We're also talking about reforms, benefits grounders, sort of like a plan, and also, can women have it all? All of that after the weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Yes, there will be some sunshine for some of us in the south today, but overall there will be quite a lot of cloud, and the further north you go, there's a chance of some showery rain in places too. That's courtesy of this weak area of low pressure and these fronts that are just starting to drift their way southwards across the UK over the next 24 hours. So it will be northern parts of the UK that generally see the thickest cloud through the rest of Sunday afternoon, and the cloud will bring some bits and pieces of rain at times, more especially over the high ground and more western parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. Further south, the skies will brighten for many parts of England and Wales, and whilst it won't be as sunny or as hot in the very far south as yesterday, it will still be very warm, temperatures still above average, highs of 26 to 28 degrees Celsius. Not quite as warm further north, and as I say, this evening will be fairly damp for northern parts of Scotland. Some bits and pieces of mostly light rain and drizzle off and on, particularly over the higher ground where there will be some low cloud giving quite misty, murky conditions in places. Perhaps turning more generally wet across parts of Northern Ireland with more general spells of rain and drizzle arriving here. But many parts of England and Wales will end the weekend on a dry note once again, and there will be some sunshine, particularly in the south and the southwest. Overall, though, through tonight, there will be quite a lot of cloud around across the UK, and even in the south, we could see one or two spots of rain and drizzle from the thickest cloud, but I don't think it will amount to very much at all. And generally speaking, by the end of the night, it will be these western areas, high ground, Wales, southwest England, where we'll see the greatest chances of some rain and drizzle. Quite a warm night to come, though, in the south, in particular 16 or 17 degrees in the towns and cities, and actually fairly mild further north too. So Monday dawns on a relatively cloudy note for many. Perhaps some bits and pieces of rain, mainly in the west and the north, and certainly turning wetter through the afternoon across the northwest. So Northern Ireland and Western Scotland seeing some pretty wet conditions as we go into the afternoon. But a more humid day for many. Temperatures into the high teens and low 20s in the north, perhaps 26 to 28 degrees in the south.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win over £65,000 in prizes. You could be our latest Great British Giveaway winner. First of all, we want to give you £60,000 in tax-free cash, plus you'll also receive a fine gold bar worth over £5,000.
For a chance to win, text GOLD to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB22 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 21st of August. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray. Are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Sunday, the 16th of August, and it's my dad's birthday actually. And this is the weekend on GB News. We have got an absolutely packed show for you, so don't you dare move a blooming muscle. Reform is promising the biggest welfare shake-up in a generation, scrapping PIP and key universal credit payments for millions to save £50 billion a year. Is it long overdue, or would genuinely disabled people pay the price? And rapists and paedophiles will be electronically tagged for a year after completing their prison sentences under a £700 million monitoring expansion. But does tagging dangerous offenders go far enough to protect victims, and does it even work? Meanwhile, people smugglers are reportedly offering half-price channel crossings to parents with newborn babies, using the infants as human shields to deter the French police. And two of America's most powerful political women have reignited the debate over motherhood and demanding careers. One freezing her eggs, the other one quitting to spend more time with her young children. Can women really have it all, or does something have to give? And is refusing to work on the new Harry Potter series principled or just plain pointless? A number of directors